Hey, action figure fans, or He-Man and Master of the Universe fans, it's me, Scott ToyGuru Neitlich. That's me, that actually is me there. See, context, right? I usually don't put myself in the videos, but I felt sometimes I wanted to insert an old picture of myself, especially because I wanted to talk in this video a little bit about the time I was at Mattel, because I keep getting asked by fans in comments and on Twitter and social media and just even friends, what do I, as the former brand manager of He-Man, think of the new Masterverse line that was announced at PowerCon? It's now, what are we in, September 2020? So, a month or two ago this was announced. Now, I am no longer at Mattel. I do not work at Mattel. I still have friends at Mattel. I still know a lot of people there, but I don't brand manage a line. All right, so with that, let's jump in. And I think a good way to address Motu Evolutions, Masterverse, that's what they're calling it, the new 6-inch line, is to look at one character in particular and how he changed. So let's look at Beastman. This is how Beastman first looked. And then, of course, it wasn't long after that he got changed to his more, simian form from a kind of shaggy dog form. And then it wasn't long after that until he looked a little bit more like this, starting to look more and more like the toy that we all know. Then for a while he actually reverted and looked like this, but that was a very short time that he looked like Elle Macpherson. He very quickly again, went back to the cross-cell art that we all know and love. And the reason I'm taking you through the evolution of Beastman is looking at the first toy of Beastman and looking at how he still is sort of, I guess you would call it, off-model from the cross-cell art, if you will. The toy itself kind of evolved and is a reflection of its time. Fast forward to 2000, when the Masters of the Universe brand was relaunched with what's called the 2000X line, or Mike Young. All the characters, in this case we're focusing on Beastman, were re-envisioned in more of a hyper-anime detail. Much bigger, shaggier, more spikes, and that design for the animation bled over to the figure. Although in some cases the figure design came first with the Four Horsemen, but that's a whole other video. Either way, the characters were redesigned. And when we did Masters of the Universe Classics about, 5 years after 2000X ended, we also redesigned them, but in this case it was more of a kind of ideal version of the vintage figure. We just added more articulation and removable armor and more paint ops, and basically tried to make the iconic version from the vintage era, but doing it for today's adult collector and selling it online, the only place you can go to sell strictly collector product. And of course, as the Classics line wrapped up, looking for a way to resell the main characters, we actually looked back at Filmation, the original animated series, because that had never been done as action figures, and that was the reason for the Club Grayskull line. I helped design the first year, and then I left Mattel, but the reason I bring it up is because I was there for the strategy, and the strategy was, how can we resell the main characters? Because the main characters sell so much better than anyone else. I mean, better than Snout Spout, better than Sir Laserlot, better than, Optic. Main characters, especially if they were in the Filmation show, are the best-selling ones, and finding new ways to sell them is important. Okay, so what have we learned so far? Well, obviously, we've learned that the style of the entertainment bleeds over into the style of the toys. So as a counterexample, the 2000X design, the hyper-anime detail, this character Chief Carnivus, who was created for the show, when it came time to doing a figure in the Classics line, he was actually scaled back and made to look more like an update of a vintage figure, losing the extra spikes and then the windblown hair and all the things that made it the 2000X style. Again, a great example is the Netflix She-Ra series that recently wrapped up. Also kind of more of an anime look, and that look bled over into the product. So, in other words, the style of the figures tend to reflect the current entertainment, shall we say, or what that is. So when they're at retail, when it's online, everything's out there. But when you're talking retail here, it's going to follow the entertainment. That's what drives interest in the show. And that entertainment needs to be for kids. It doesn't need to be on YouTube, but it needs to get kids as an audience to support a retail line, which means it needs to focus on the main characters, which makes sense, right? I mean, main characters don't just sell best to collectors, they sell best to kids because these are the characters you see in the show. So you're like, okay, enough background. I thought you were supposed to be saying, what are your thoughts on the Masterverse? All right, here's why I'm making this video. Characters like Negator, or characters like the Masks of Power Demon, that Penny Dreadful does a great YouTube series on what these characters would look like in classics. You can see a link here. These are characters I know fans really want in classics. But, and this is my opinion, I don't believe you're going to be getting this in Masterverse. I could be wrong. I don't work for Mattel right now. But based on the 10 years I spent there and my time on the brand, classics is pretty much over. Yes, it could be brought back. Marvel Legends has been brought back, 1 or 2 times, even by another company. But it's way more likely that the Masterverse line, because it's at retail, is going to look like the new Netflix show. It's essentially going to be main characters redesigned to work in the aesthetic and the feel and the animation style of the brand new Netflix show, because that's the current entertainment. To get kids buying this, that's what it needs to do. So going back to our Beastman example that we had, the original vintage toy that gets reimagined for 2000X will now get reimagined once again for the new Netflix series. I know there's actually 2 of them in the works. And, if you look at the teaser poster, they make it very clear that at least one of them is an anime-inspired show, meaning the style is going to be very anime, so you kind of expect that in the toys, if they're basing it off that show. Now, we do know, it's going to be 7-inch scale, 30 points articulation. It does note, core characters with more coming. The reason I'm sort of making this video is trying to manage expectations. When they say more, sure, you're going to get more characters. I don't know how obscure they're going to get. It's at retail. And I know you're saying, wait a minute, Star Wars is at retail, and they do tons of obscure characters. They do characters that were on screen for like half a second, and kids buy them, and it's crazy. Well, yeah, that was like in year 5. When they launched Star Wars in 1995, and really every time they launch a Star Wars line, like even for the last movie, it's just the main characters. That's all they do. Because these are the ones that kids are going to recognize. I mean, even going down to Wave 5 of the Power of the Force 2 launch, Greedo was probably the most obscure character. And, I mean, I know Greedo is the king of the form factor and is one of the coolest Star Wars villains, bounty hunters, rogues ever, but he's not that obscure. And it isn't until like year 7 that they start doing characters like Effant Mon, and even he's a fan's choice figure. Yes, Star Wars does very obscure figures, but it took years before they got to that. So, I mean, the first 2.5, 3 years of the launch was all main characters. Getting to anyone beyond like Greedo and Ponda Baba in the Cantina took years to happen, and that was because a fan base built up. But when you're launching a line, you're going to focus on the main guys, the main characters. I'm not saying Masterverse couldn't get there. I certainly hope it does. But, example after example, when you're looking at, again, Star Wars, it's the main guys that are out there. You don't see those characters with half a second of screen time in any of the form factors, whether it's for kids, whether it's a customized exclusive item, whether it's a 3 3/4, 12-inch, whatever the form factor, you're going to get 90% main characters at retail. Comic-Con and online exclusives are where you're going to get the more obscure characters. Perfect example being the Jocasta Nu Librarian was only available at Brian's Toys in a deluxe package, never sold at retail. Female character, older character, librarian, not for kids. So it's essentially, for Masterverse to work, and again, my opinion, I am not working on it, I don't have any inside knowledge, the animation obviously has to work with kids. It has to hit. It has to, be that magical formula where the characters become bigger than the show, like what happened with Filmation. That's why the 80s He-Man show, or He-Man line was so huge. it has to work with the core demographic, which is boys 6 to 11. And yes, social justice warriors, He-Man's for everyone. I get it, but you know what? I'm calling it like I'm calling it, and He-Man is a property most aimed at boys and young boys. And, boys 6 to 11 or 4 to 12, whatever you want to call it, have to be into the show. They have to see it as not only aspirational, but they have to see it as something they want merchandise for. And not just action figures, almost more importantly, merchandise like backpacks and t-shirts and flip-flops, because wearing a character, which is called billboarding a character, really is what kids show their love for. Collector product is easy. I mean, you can make collector product for He-Man from now till doomsday. You're going to be able to sell it online anytime, but getting it into retail, it's really the collectors buying the kid product, like what they do with 2000X. 2000X was not a collector line. Sure, they had a few collector figures, like Keldor and She-Ra, sold at Comic-Con, not at retail. But all of the retail figures, these were main characters aimed at kids. It just happened that collectors also liked them. They were the gravy. 80% of the sales, like for any retail line, was going to kids. It's great that collectors are into this, and this is kind of what Masterverse, I think, is also going to be. It's going to be a brand new style of figure based on the new animation, and it's going to focus mainly on main characters. Now, you might see some reused parts, like the way Classics parts were used in the Club Grayskull Filmation look, with kind of new heads and new armor, new wristbands, new belts. You may see some of those parts reused. They may kind of work with a Classics figure, but just as much as a Club Filmation or Filmation series works with a Classics figure. So if you feel like those two mix, then hey, it mixes. If the line's at retail, which it is, that's the idea, it's going to be a kid-focused line, which means obscure characters are probably not going to show up at first. And whichever animation it's based on, I know Netflix has 2 shows in the works, this will drive the aesthetic of the line. It may be compatible with Classics, but if you're expecting more classic figures, that's kind of why I made this video, because I hate seeing fans get really excited for something that's probably not happening. I just don't see this line being a continuation of Classics, as much as it's much more closer to a sort of the way 2000X was a new He-Man line that essentially reimagined a vintage Motu world, character, in a different style. And, I believe that that's what we're going to get. For Masterverse is the new Netflix style, just like we got the new 2000X style for all the characters, starting with the main characters. So I hope this worked. I hope you like this. This was just an opinion piece. If you've got questions, comments, leave them below. Give me a like, give me a subscription. That'll make me happy, right? That's what this is all about, right? Making me happy? No, just kidding. Anyway, I hope this opinion helped. I just like sharing my thoughts, and I'll see you guys in the next video.